Take him.
Oh, God, please, I'm begging you. God, please, I'm begging you. In the name of Jesus.
Your voice rings loud.
The movie Black Book, as directed by Editti Effiong, follows the story of Paul Edima, Mofe Damijo, a deacon and a former gang member who seeks justice for his son who was framed and killed by a corrupt police gang. The movie deals with issues as police brutality, corruption, and the abuse of power. Hi there, welcome to my channel, Movie Chat with Tiana. Please do well to sit back, grab your hot popcorn as I commence the plot of this movie. Remember, this recap is not meant to replace the original movie, either should it stop you from seeing the movie in its full originality. Fall back to Netflix to see the movie in full. The movie begins in a bridge where there seemed to be a heavy traffic jam as many were stuck. A man named Dotun Greg with his baby, nanny and driver waiting for the traffic to stop. Suddenly, there was a heavy shooting, screaming and people running helter-skelter. The attackers were well armed, and then they poured fuel on Dotun Greg's vehicle, and their leader, Angel, almost put on the fire to burn the vehicle when the man gently surrendered, and the nanny tried to run away with the baby but was killed too. They took the man away and carried his baby. The police came to the venue but were outnumbered by the robbers. However, they arrested a member of the gang who was later bailed out from jail. In the morning, the news of the kidnap was read on the radio where it was announced that one of the suspected kidnappers escaped police custody, and the police described the suspect as male, dark, tall and dreadlocked hair. Mr. Paul and his son were having their moment, swimming and bonding in the kitchen, when he informs him to come to church with him, as he has been asked to lead the preaching that evening. He declined, saying he doesn't believe in God. Paul got dressed and left to preach in church. As he left, people greeted him. A young journalist named Victoria happily arrived at work and meets her boss, who congratulated her for her efforts but informs her that her job will not be published on the front page as she has decided to go with more compelling narratives. Angry Victoria asked her why, but she says she is protecting her from danger. Mrs. Stella Gregg received a call from Angel, who tells her to make up her mind on whom she wants to be alive, her baby or her husband. She begged him to spare their lives as she has 11.2 million naira for them, but Angel says money is not his problem. He tells her to make up her mind and got really upset. But in all, he shot the baby. Mrs. Gregg cried bitterly. He tells her that if she must see her husband again, she has to do all he wants her to do, and he asked her to resign from her job, which she did. The news was read on the television and people couldn't help but react. We see a caliber of some powerful politicians gathered seeing the news when one of the men brought him a file saying Greg had been handled. They all smiled and the general says, "Take them to the farm." Damilola Edima, Paul's son, was on his way to church when he was stopped by some policemen who accused him of being a thief. He tells them otherwise, but they refused to listen. They let Baba Bernard go, but mistreated the poor boy and shot him. Baba Bernard rushed to church and tells his dad what had happened. He came to the scene and wept bitterly, seeing his son's corpse and his blood mixed with sand. The police took his body and labeled the culprit behind the Greg kidnap. Paul mourned his son alone for some days before going to the station every day demanding for his body so that he would bury him properly. On each visit to the police station, Paul Edima was mocked in refusal to grant his request. One day, he meets up with a journalist called Victoria. She tells him to allow her be of help to him on his son's case, but he ignored her. Another day, he goes to the police, begging them to give him the case file on Damilola Edima. They snubbed him and later rained insults on him. In anger, he hit the face of the policeman, who pushed him away on the table. They kept him in a cell. Victoria pleaded to see him and they granted her request. She tells him that she can be of help and help him get the record, as she has some friends among the police who could help. She promised to come bail him in the morning, but all Paul Edima could say was, "Leave me alone." That night, the policemen on duty beat him up badly and threw his body into a river. In the morning, Victoria goes to his house to see him, but saw him dropping down from a tricycle. She asked him what had happened, but he lied, telling her that he slipped and fell. He got a first aid box and began to treat himself. She gave him the copy of the police reports file, and it all appeared they framed his son. Paul advised her to leave the case alone, given how dirty it is. He quotes a portion of the Bible which says that vengeance is mine and I will repay, saying that she should leave it for God. Victoria tells him that leaving it for God is the problem with Nigeria, and thereby making many more young men out there victim of the same case as his son. These words made Paul decide to seek revenge for his son's death, thereby going back to his old ways of a ruthless and powerful criminal. He contacted his old friend Aliyu, telling him they have a job. Paul took his revenge to the streets, where they helped him capture the men that killed his son. He tied them up in a dark room and tortured their leader into telling him who sent them to killing his son. Victoria comes to Edima's house after knocking for a long period of time. She enters into his home and began to look around his stains. On hearing his footsteps, she hid in his son's room but stole his flash drive containing a confession video of the killers. Paul took the killers to the road and labeled them a murderer. He left them on the road for the public to see. Victoria took the drive to her boss so she could expose them, but she destroyed it instead. In her words, she says she is doing it for her own good and do not want her dead like her mother. As she left, she called the DC of the police and says she just intercepted a recording of his voice confessing and has blocked it. She tells him to inform the senator that he owes her a huge debt and must pay. The killers of Damilola Edima returned to depot, who could not help but question them, screaming, "Paul Edima's son, you people killed Paul Edima's son." The DC said, "We thought he was just an old man." An old man? Paul Edima, the most dangerous man in this country. He went on and narrated all that he has done in the past. He says, 23 assassinations, 113 domestic operations, participated and plotted 8 coups d'etat in West Africa since 1984. He kept shouting. Angel tells him to spill the information he gave Paul Edima that made him spare his life. Angel tried to strangle him but left him. Angel suggested that they inform the general about Paul. Angel shot the SACS officer who killed Paul Edima's son and says they should pin his death on him, with the caption, "Paul Edima shot a decorated police officer."
That's the answer to your problem, right? Paul Edima shot a decorated police officer.
Victoria took Paul to Mrs. Gregg, who couldn't help but recount how much she invested on 14 failed cycles of IVF just to get a child. They killed her baby and told her to walk away, which she did, but they killed her husband too, leaving her empty. She says the threat began when she started working on some oil blocks. She handed Paul the documents. She tells Victoria to help her get justice for her family members in tears. At night, Paul and Victoria worked on the oil files, trying to dig out some information. While they were working, Angel and his boys were coming to his house to get him killed. As the research went on, Paul sensed the evil men behind it all and begged Vicky to walk away from the case for her own safety. She questioned on why he wants her away, but he tells her it's the only way to protect her. She shows him the video where the commissioner declared him a wanted man. The video caused an argument between Vicky and Paul until they noticed they have been surrounded. Paul keeps Vicky in hiding and takes out the killer one after the other in the dark. Then he was left with Angel. Angel hears Victoria's voice and opens the door where she was hiding. Paul ordered him to drop the gun and sit down, which he did. He asked Angel to tell him who sent him to kill him. Then he knew it. He discovered it was one of General's men, Dippo, who is afraid that he will come after his son. Polo and Angelo argued about how there were weapons to the general, and he picked Paul as his favorite weapon. Paul demanded a live video confession of Angel, Dippo and his son, admitting to what they had done to him. Angel tells him the general will never agree to that and he knows it, but Paul tells him that for his own sake he prayed the general agrees. The next night, he left with Victoria and bombed his home. Paul met up with his old friend Aliyu for help. The general and Angel held a meeting. He apologized for his late son's death and offered him $1 million. Paul says all he wants is his son's body and needs a confession video from Angel, Dippo, and his son. As the general refuses, says there is nothing else to discuss and he will get Dippo with or without his help. As he tries to leave, the general warns him that he doesn't have full control, but he leaves either ways. The general slaps Dippo twice on the cheek for being stupid and killing Edima's son. He says he will not stop until he gets what he wants, so he will order a fumigation by calling in the only person that never fails. He calls in a young and experienced assassin who killed most of the policemen, and they leave a write-up that makes Paul Edima the suspect. The commissioner on seeing this says Paul Edima is a public enemy number one.
Going forward, Paul Edima is public enemy number one.
Victoria visits a priest who raised her from childhood and snapped some files from his office. Ali tells Paul that he needs to be more careful of the general and needs more leverage. Ali advises Paul to go in search for Richard, who will be of great help to him regarding the case at hand. When Paul got there, he saw a lady who told him that Richard is dead and was her lover. She tells him that she's the real Big Daddy and not Richard. While they discussed, the killer from the general appeared and began killing the boys in the neighborhood. She tells him to run, and he did. They ran and the killer pursued him, but he managed to escape. In the night, Paul paid the commissioner a visit in her home. He explained to her all that had happened between his son and the SACS officer and how they framed him. With this, she called the officer Osaratin in her office and questioned him on why there is no file report on the death of Damilola's case. While they were talking, a gun from the other building came and killed the officer Osaratin, whom happened to be the general's hired killer. Big Daddy ordered one of her ladies who killed the general's killer. Victoria took the black book she found from Paul's house to the priest, and there she found Paul inside the cathedral. Paul narrated the story of his past life to Vicky, how he was the general's best man between the year 1982 and 1984. In his voice, he says, there was a drug trafficking boom from South America, and the General Issa used him as a weapon to eliminate everyone blocking his way. He trained them and he, of course, became his best man. But one night, he went on a mission to kill a journalist who kept record of all that had happened. He shot her in her home, but saved her daughter. He took her to the priest on June 4th, 1996. Vicky, on hearing this, was very upset, knowing that Paul killed her mother. As Father Omotosho tried to stop her, she yelled at him in anger. As she tried to walk away, Angel and his men took her and opened fire on Father and Paul. Unfortunately, the father got killed, but Paul escaped. He shot back on them, but they took Vicky and drove away. Paul's phone rang and it was General. He called him to come meet him in Kaduna within 24 hours, or else Victoria would die. Big Daddy drove in and decided to join forces with him to take away all of the General's powers. Paul narrated the exchange he had to make for Vicky's life and how he gave the General the black book in order to let him go scot-free and live his life in peace. But this time, he is determined to take the black book back. With this, they had to head back to Kaduna, where he had some of his old friends he trained with the general come help him fight the last battle. Paul, using a map, planned to perfection how he will use the map to carry out the operation on the general. Big Daddy brings his girls too, who poisoned the drinks they served to most of General's men and used their Muslim hijab to cover their weapons. On the day of the operation, they used a bomb blast to distract innocent people from the arena. Then, most of the general's boys came in their high numbers. Paul turned himself into the general, unarmed, while Big Daddy's girl walked in pretense on the farm. Paul and Vicky were tied, and Vicky says she hopes Paul's death is a sad and horrible one. The general gave her a gun and asked her to shoot him, and a bullet mistakenly hit his leg as it was forced by Angel. Big Daddy's girls were doing the most on the farm, killing the men gradually. The general mocked Paul as the girl he had come a long way to rescue is out to kill him, but Paul tells him he doesn't have full control. Big Daddy and her girls went to the safe at the farm and ordered the man in control to give her the safe containing the black book, which he did. The general's men were outnumbered and Big Daddy got away with the safe. She ordered her girl to send the file to the authorities, which she finally did. After a long hours of driving, they finally stopped at the warehouse. Big Daddy alighted with her girls. Angel asked for the safe, but it wasn't in the van. He sees a video of a coup which Big Daddy had sent to the Nigerian army, and with this, they were all doomed. There was an immediate command and the police left them, with lots of army men coming to the farm. Angel was left alone, with Big Daddy's girls littered all over the place, well and heavily armed. Big Daddy commanded him to put his gun down, which he did, and her girls jubilated. As they were celebrating, the safe quietly passed through the lake. Paul gave the General Issa a gun to end his life and save himself the shame, but he turns the gun on Paul's head instead, not knowing the gun is without a bullet. Paul tells him that he never knew him to be a coward. Then he left. Paul dropped some messages for Vicky on where she would find the black book and ensured to use it the right way as he couldn't long time ago. With these instructions, Vicky used the black book to bring the General Issa and Depot to justice, and Angel too was arrested. Paul was able to recover his son's corpse and bury him the right way, thereby bringing his body back home and making him rest in peace. With all being said, justice prevailed and everything became normal. I hereby come to the end of this wonderful movie recap. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please do well to like, subscribe, and leave your comments about this thriller movie in the comment section.